to be professionals by the time we finish this. All right, here we go. All right, good morning. I am so excited to be with all of you. My name is Paya Sample. I am the CEO of Peak Leaders Collective, where I have the privilege of walking alongside leaders to really lead from an authentic place and create spaces of dignity that really honor each and every one of those that they have the privilege of leading. And so I'm really excited for today's LinkedIn Live. And as you can probably tell, it looks a little different than it typically has in the past because Corey and I are here together in person. We tried this out today for this really important conversation. It's really going to be a conversation around the fact that leadership starts with you, this hidden side of leadership. We tend to talk about the visible parts of leadership, the meetings, the to-do, the executing of the projects, but it's really important for us to pause as leaders and really think about the internal piece of what it really takes to lead well, which means we have to start from the inside out. And so this has been something we have talked about quite a bit, just naturally in our conversations. And so Corey is the person that I was like, this, if I'm going to talk with anyone, it's going to be you. And so I'm privileged to be here with Corey Quinn, who has become a friend of mine at this point. We've known each other less than a year, but it feels like forever. And so I'm going to let Corey introduce himself to you, and then we'll get started with our conversation. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Paya.
You're welcome.
Yeah, as Paya said, my name is Corey Quinn. I'm a lifelong educator, been at it about 30 years, held a number of different roles, everything from classroom teacher to administrator to school head. And I'm back in the classroom after all these years. And so just a thrill to get it to share with you.
Yeah.
I've already shared some of it, personally, and that's created this space where I feel totally comfortable sharing it with you again for the benefit of others. And it's just great to hear you say your mission out loud to whoever might be watching. I'm here to be in service to you and to that mission.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you so much. And so as we shared, we're very excited and both really passionate about this topic because it's something that's near and dear to each and every one of our hearts. And we really see this as a chance for you to not feel alone in the work that you're doing and to see that this internal work that we have to do as leaders is part of the journey. It's part of the work. And so we are not experts by any means. We are people who have been walking through it ourselves and just want to create space to talk more about it. And hopefully as you listen to our conversation today, that you can just pick up on some nuggets of things that again resonate with you or some new things to really think about of how to really lead from the inside out. And so I'm excited to jump right in. And so Corey shared a little bit about his leadership journey, and I'll share briefly my leadership journey. And so I started in teaching, never with the desire to leave the classroom. I actually started thinking I was going to be a middle school teacher. And then I taught middle school and the kids were bigger than me. And I was like, I don't think I can do this. And so I went to first grade and I was like, yes, this feels like my jam. And so I loved it. I taught first through fourth grade. I was the teacher that when there were openings within the district or even in the building, I was like, yeah, I would love to try it out. I want to try it. I want to, take on the challenge for a number of reasons. One, I think I'm a idea junkie. I love researching, learning, and how can we take this research-backed tool or skill, and how can we apply it in the classroom? But I loved learning about the different developmental stages and the things that were happening in kids' brains at these different ages, and how to really craft and set up instruction to really meet their needs to where they are, and also really, creating community and creating space. And so love that, taught first through fourth grade, and again, went into it thinking this was going to be what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And the first inkling that I had that there might be, I guess, something different for me is most of the principals of the leaders that I worked under were great individuals, but I didn't see them often. I didn't see them in my classrooms. I didn't see them with my students out on the playground. I didn't really feel known by them. I didn't really feel seen as an educator, as an individual by them. And so I kind of had this idea that leadership is something that happens mysteriously behind the closed door. But it was not until I had a leader, a principal specifically, who really took the time to get to know me. I remember sitting down, having a one-on-one with her where she not only wanted to understand me and understand who I was professionally, but also personally, the person behind the position and what were my goals and my aspirations were for my classroom. And that was, I would say, the first seed that was planted to just help me to think, whoa, something is different about this type of leader. It wasn't like, okay, now I want to be a principal, but it was just like, this is different. And it was very connected to, it felt very similar to what I was doing with my students in my classroom. So not just saying, I'm here, here's my lesson, hope you learn it, but really taking the time to get to know each and every one of my students is what I saw her doing with myself. And then she was able to really kind of give me really effective feedback connected to the things that were important to me. And so I went from the classroom into an instructional coordinator role, and enjoyed it, and was then ready. I was like, okay, I'm ready to go be a principal somewhere. And I got scared, the best way to put it. I was afraid of losing the pulse or the connection of what was happening on the daily with the class, in the classroom with the students and the teacher. And so I went back into the classroom. I said, all right, I'm going to go from this instructional world back into the classroom, but truly with a different lens of how can I really work to fill in some of the blind spots of what principals need to know, what principals need to do, or what I would want out of a principal that's really connected to what I'm doing. And so I went back into the classroom and then into a principal role from there. And so that's kind of like my leadership journey and then into the work that I get to do now. But that's kind of like what my journey has looked like, I would say, over this time.
Isn't it fascinating to look back?
It is. It's extremely fascinating. Extremely when I look back and think, what? How am I? Sometimes I get surprised and I'm doing the work that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There are two words and thank you for sharing that. So the two words that stand out to me are fear and connection. So the fear piece stands out to me because I just hope for the benefit of anybody listening today that they can appreciate that these are two people who have come from places of fear, because I'll talk about my fears today too. And that's real. I mean, I just think that's real. So I think you've already given a great gift to anybody who's tuning in today. And then that connection piece stands out because I hope people will hear that it was that leader's connection with you that inspired your journey. That particularly the piece that stands out is the getting to know you personally component of it. And so, I mean, these are basic things that anybody who's aspiring or in a current leadership role probably already knows, but I think it's just really, it's just good to hear it again and to see two leaders who have been through it and are sharing that, these are actually the things that made a difference in our own leadership journeys. Some of these things are timeless. Yes.
And I think when you say people have probably heard it, which yes, they probably have, but it's also probably been forgotten because we get so caught up in the what's in front of you right now, like the endless to-dos, that we sometimes forget some of the things that we know are essential in order for us to be able to do this work effectively. And so I want to talk a little bit about the transition from, I use the phrase a lot in my work of being a doer to a leader, because for a lot of times, and even what I felt like was modeled to me, I thought leadership meant doing more. Doing more of the same. Like I was the person that, like, I love getting stuff done. I love solving problems. I love saying, all right, hand me that and I'm going to take care of it. But I had to realize, and I didn't get it right away. But when I stepped into that leadership role, I realized that wasn't going to work. This, like, taking all the problems from everyone and being the one that did fix the problems for them wasn't going to work. That actually being a leader required a completely different set of skill sets that I was never taught. Right? Like I got a degree in leadership, and there are many things that were not covered in that program. And so, like, I wonder about if you felt that transition, kind of that gap in that transition from the doer to leader, and what that felt like for you.
I'm going back to a memory I have of being 20 something years old. I'm probably, maybe I'm in my early college years, maybe I'm fresh out of college. And my mom left a little note on the desk in my bedroom. It was an article, actually, from the Post. She'd cut out an article and it was about somebody. And she wrote in like Sharpie at the top of it and read, "Be a doer." Okay, so the word, it said, "Be a doer." And I looked at the word doer, D-O-E-R. And I was like, what is a doer? Like, what is it? And it was one of those times where, I don't know if you ever had that experience where you're looking at a word and like, that can't possibly be the way you spell it. But so I'm bringing that up because I think, like a lot of people who wind up in leadership, I was conditioned to be a doer. I think by my nature, I'm more of a beer, which is
Mm.
BER. I'm not a beer, but a beer. And I learned to be a doer, and I got so good at doing
Yeah.
because the rewards are
Yeah.
often really great.
Yeah.
You know, you get promotions and you get more financial rewards for being a doer. And so that became almost a compulsion that I think I lost touch with a critical piece of who I am as a person. And I think that's part of what we're here to talk about is, you know, how do you merge some of these things that are called on in leadership? We're called to be doers. You have to be a doer to be a leader. And I think there's also increasingly, ironically, paradoxically, however you want to say it, I think as the world gets busier, I think there's just more and more of a need to be able to be a person who steps back and just be and to be a leader.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. And I completely connect with the idea of like, I'm a high achiever. I'm the person that likes to get things done. I feel the sense of satisfaction when I check off things off of my to-do list. And I feel like when I first stepped into, I would say the leadership role itself, because my definition of leaders is like, we can be leaders regardless of a role, regardless where you sit. But specifically for this conversation, when I think about the role where I was, you know, managing others, people were looking to me, I was evaluating others. I felt like I quickly realized I feel like burnout is a phrase we use now. It wasn't one that I would say was popular when I became a principal. And I wouldn't even say that I was, I even felt burnout. I just kept going. It was like I didn't have an off button. And the work I was doing was becoming it was quickly becoming the thing that was consuming me. It was what I spent all my time on, and it quickly became what I was finding my identity in. So it was like, I have to do the things so that so that it makes me feel like I am the person I'm supposed to be in the principal role, but even in that coach role in the building. And so that, again, I can't go back and say, oh, I was burnt out. And that was the moment when I realized I needed to do something different. It wasn't. It was like I was just going 100 miles per hour and there was no end in sight for me. And it was kind of like, I just got to keep up the pace. I just got to keep doing.
I'm shaking my head right now because as much as you and I have talked, and I think you said it at the start, we haven't known each other a long time, but I feel a deep sense of connection to you. And with what you just said, a lot of that is brand new. I've never heard you say that. And it tells me more about why we're connected. I identify so strongly with everything you just said. I can look back and I can name the burnout. I can see in hindsight where it was happening, and we've got more tools and more awareness around some of these things now. So I don't want to cast too much of the blame on you and me for not having seen it or not being able to name it. But it is one of the challenges and threats to being a leader is to hop on that proverbial treadmill and just completely lose sight of, I mean, it's almost like if the screen were to go blank or the keys are disabled. I'm thinking about a treadmill, the digital ones where, you know, you can reach up and quickly hit the stop button or crank down
turn down the speed.
And I think as I look back on some of my later moments in leadership, the formal kind of leadership, I can see that is almost like somebody threw a towel over that screen and said, just keep going.
Yes.
And mostly that was it. Nobody was actually saying that, but that's what I thought I had to do because that's what got me there.
Yes. And I wonder even for you, because this was for me, people weren't saying it, but that's what I was seeing being modeled around me as well. So no one was like, keep going. But as I'm looking around, everyone was going at this pace. No one was asking for help. The idea of even saying like, hey, I'm struggling with this thing was not present. It was not a common element that I saw happening within leadership. So unintentionally, these were messages that I think were really shaping what I saw leadership, what it needed to be, what I thought it needed to be in many ways, you know? And so it's just good to hear it. Again, we haven't talked about this, but just even now, even though I'm not in that space anymore, just to know like, all right, I wasn't alone. And so I think it's why it's so important for us to have these conversations. And again, especially hopeful hopefully it's helpful to folks who are maybe in the midst of it right now.
Mm.
And so we have talked quite a bit before, I mean, even up until this conversation, about the internal work that we've had to do, right? So shifting from being the doer, if we want to call it that, to being the leader, not only require these like skills, I have to communicate more effectively, I have to delegate all these pieces, but it also required us to kind of, I would say, pause and really think about who we are as a leader. And I think one of the things I want to talk with you about is like the internal sides that I don't hear people naming enough is when we go into leadership, it's really important to know who you are, but also like what you're really good at, like your strengths, right? The things that make you unique, the things that make you stand out. So being clear on that, the strength side, but also understanding the things that you can't do, right? So I don't know about you, but it took me some time to not I feel like I walked into leadership knowing what I was good at, but I also had this idea that I was supposed to be good at everything.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be the expert in all the things. And so part of that like the treadmill was like, all right, I need to research, I need to read, I need to take the webinars, all these courses to get good at everything, to have strength in everything.
Yeah.
Was that something that you experienced as well? Maybe you did.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There are all these little, vignettes playing out in my head, and I'm trying to decide which one to pull from. And so I don't know if this is going to connect precisely, but I'm just thinking about one of my first experiences in a, kind of like formal leadership role was I switched schools to go from being a teacher to being the president of a small middle school. And the school that I left, which was a high school, that school did service work with the faculty, went out on like service project kind of days. And they so my former colleagues came to my new school, which was in North St. Louis and required all kinds of resources from outside to keep it going. And so now my former colleagues are in front of me and all eyes are on me, waiting for me to tell them about the mission of this new school. And I just thought that was my first kind of, we have all these names like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I didn't have that. I didn't know what that was
right,
5 years ago, but that's probably what it was. And this was probably 15 years ago now that I'm standing in front of my colleagues and I'm thinking to myself, these people, they know what I don't know.
Yes.
Like I'm not going to fool them. And so I remember just being tongue tied for a moment, thinking to myself, who am I to speak to this group of people when they know that 6 months ago I was in a classroom just like the rest of them, and I would be out doing the service work with them on this day. So that was it was a humbling experience to have that opportunity. But it was one of those moments that I think you're speaking about where I was looking into the eyes of my colleagues and I was saying to myself, what am I doing here? Like, what tools do I have in order to do this? So, I mean, absolutely. I've been in that spot a number of times in the journey.
Yeah. And I think, I feel I can think of definitely times I had a similar where took staff back, but it was to the school where I was a principal in, I took staff where I was a principal back to where I was a classroom teacher. And so kind of have a similar connection of what that felt like. But I think and even realizing like what our weaknesses are, one of the things that, and then we'll get to the strength side, but I think one of the moments I can remember realizing like I can't fake it, and this is not a fake it till you make it moment, is I was the building principal of a school that was early childhood to 6th grade. And so kind of had the early childhood, the elementary, and a little bit of the middle school tap. But I quickly realized the lowest grade I taught was 1st grade. Early childhood is a very different like setup, and the developmental stage. It was just many areas where I did not have experience, or even like the knowledge of students and children at that age. And so I remember we were trying to figure out some pieces around the early childhood program, and we're in a meeting and like someone asked me the question. I was like, if I try to fake it right now, the kids are going to be the ones that suffer, right? And the kids, the students, and all these pieces. But really, realizing like naming that I didn't know, but I knew who to go to. Like I knew, like, all right, I knew which teachers, the teachers down there who were, have been doing it for much longer, who understand it. I thought it was going to be seen as a weakness because I had to say, like, I don't know. I need to go and check with these other folks.
Yeah.
But realize that actually really worked to kind of plant seeds of trust between myself and the staff, because I was able to communicate clearly what I'm good at. But even that idea of naming what I'm not good at was really, really important. And I always say, like, I hire people that are smarter than me, because I know what my strengths are. Like, I know I'm good at these things. So when I'm hiring, I don't need to hire people who are good at all the same things. I need to hire folks who are good at the other pieces to kind of fill in some of those blanks, which I think are really important.
I want to jump in and say, like, in addition to knowing who to hire, when you have that mindset, I'm going to call it a heart set. I'm just thinking about the gift you gave to the people who had already been hired before you got there. So when my leader comes in and says, I don't know, that's a gift. I mean, when they are willing to stand in that moment and own it and be that authentic, like, what a huge gift to those who are already there to say, oh, okay, so, like, I'm working for someone, and to the extent that people still feel that way, like, this is my boss. And I find that, and I think most people do find that, very inspiring. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate you naming that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good piece around another part of why it's so important for us to know what we're good at and be able to communicate that, but also know the areas that we don't have the skill in. And so I think that's part of that internal work that people don't tell leaders. You need to be clear about what you're good at and how to kind of leverage that, but also, tapping on the shoulder of others. Because I started to see, like, in going to those staff members who were there for early childhood, or when it was time to figure out a Spanish curriculum. I don't speak Spanish. I took it, don't remember much of it, but that was not my strength. But even going to my staff and asking for their insight and saying, hey, I'm assuming you have some expertise in this area, really work to build, when we talk about connection, that connection, but also for them to see that I knew that they had something, like the competence, the credibility, and the strengths that I really wanted to leverage. Like that showed that I was willing to say, like, I don't know it all, And I think that's an important piece. So for leaders realizing, like, you can't be great at everything, right? And that's normal, and that we need to be able to know, like, what we bring to the table and how we can rely on that. I think it's super important. So.
Love it.
Yeah. So as we think about, like, continuing on this idea around the internal work, so knowing that there's a shift from being a doer to a leader, and then knowing one part of the, like, internal work that we've had to do is, like, what we're good at and what we're not good at. Let's talk about emotional intelligence, like the emotional side, because we've talked about this quite a bit already. But the term emotional intelligence feels like this buzzword in today's day and age. But I really feel like it's something that we need to make sure we have some meat around it, like, not just, like, flippantly using these phrases. But as leaders, it really kind of comes down to, like, the emotional regulation, our self-awareness, and even knowing, like, what our triggers are, the backstory that we might be bringing to the table. And so I would love to hear, like, what is some of the work that you've had to do around the emotional intelligence side of leadership?
I think I'm going to go back to that little story I told about getting that newspaper article from my mom saying, be a doer. I think I saw my leadership as built upon, well, like you, it eventually, I think in talking over the course of the last several months with you, I think we both took our leadership very seriously, and maybe even at times took it to a place, and didn't intend to take it to a place where it became perhaps a big part of our identity. And I think that the doing and the leading became synonymous, and then the leading became synonymous with who Corey Quinn is. And then when I started to see that treadmill, like, I think I was starting to reach for the button, and I was everything from, well, what will people think if I push the button? If I push the button, then I'm human, and then what happens? And what if this thing stops? And so just to be practical for a second, I remember so I'm the president of a high school at this point, and I remember going to my board chair, and I think this was my spirit talking on behalf of my body, saying, I'm exhausted. And he was very kind about it, but there was also a certain element of like, oh, Corey, you're doing great. Just, keep it up.
Oh,
Do you need to
goodness,
take
Corey,
a little,
yes.
take a day.
Yeah, take a day off.
Yeah. And, eventually what happened was, I think there were two big warning signs that I missed that were actually both physical manifestations. One was I went to the hospital because one night when I was getting ready for bed, I had like the classic symptoms of a heart attack, like, something happening in my arm and numbness and tingling. And then I started to feel disoriented. And so I walked to the fire station, like a block away from my house, because I didn't want my wife to know.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so I'm sitting in the light of the fire station. It's late at night. I mean, it's bedtime. And there are EMTs putting, cuffs on my arms and taking my blood pressure. And eventually I'm in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. So, they couldn't find anything, but I think my body was telling me, if you don't do something soon, this is not going to work out well.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't end up happening. So I just jumped back on the treadmill. And I don't know what the timeline is on this, but eventually I found myself on one evening. I had a packed schedule one day where I got to school early in the morning because my favorite thing to do was to greet students and parents when they're dropping off their kids. And so it was very important for me to be there early in the morning for that part of the day. It was sometimes the favorite part of my day.
Yeah.
And that particular day, it was just packed. And so I remember at the end of the evening, I think I went from some meetings after school to an alumni dinner. And since there were going to be coaches at this alumni dinner kind of promoting the athletic program, I asked the coaches to stick around for a little bit after the alumni dinner so that I could talk with them. And my goal was to laud their efforts and applaud the incredible year that we had in athletics. And by the time that meeting came at the end of the evening, I was so frazzled. I was just, so drained that when the meeting kind of was brought to order and it was time for me to stand up and get ready to say thank you to them, I just had a complete anxiety attack. I just completely broke down, and I didn't even know at the time what that was. Yeah. And so on the one hand, it became a really significant moment, kind of to your earlier point about telling people, hey, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
In that moment, I had to say, I don't know what's happening to me right now. I don't want to scare you all, but I don't know what's happening. And a couple people came up to me after that and were very, just very kind and very compassionate. In some ways, it felt like a galvanizing sort of a moment, but it was one of, as I look back, there were several of these signs, but those are the two that stand out. And, I bring them up now because I got to believe there's a leader out there who, if they're still listening, maybe their body is telling them or something's telling them. Like you said earlier, something about burnout. And again, we've got names for these things. And I feel like in a lot of ways, there's more awareness around these things and more tools. I also believe there's probably people out there still fighting the idea of, well, not me, like I can't either that had never happened to me because I'm too strong for that, or I can't fall apart because my school will fall apart or my family will fall apart. But those are some of my experiences with, and I think the other key here is to draw a straight line, because this is the point in my leadership where it was pretty clear I had to get help, and so that's where the inner work, really started for me, was starting to connect some of these dots, and they pointed in the straight line to, hey, Corey, you need to get help, but I can talk more about that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you being so honest about that piece. Like, and I think that I can imagine there are more leaders that resonate with that than we even realize, right? Like realizing like we get to this point where if we're not going to recognize that our bodies are going to clearly tell us something's not right. And so I just appreciate you naming that. And hopefully just as someone's listening and hear, like, listen to our bodies, right?
Yeah.
It makes me think about there's a couple of things I want to go back to when you said you tried to advocate for yourself and sharing with, your, I think it was board at the time of like, hey, I'm struggling or I need help with this. And them saying, oh, you got this, you got this.
Yeah.
That has happened to me on a number of times because you're such a high achiever and you're a doer, that when you ask for help or say, I'm struggling with this, oftentimes people don't actually take us seriously.
Yep.
Right. And so then I'll speak for myself, like when that has happened to me and a couple of, not just in the like lead principal role, but even in that coaching role, where then I'm starting to ask myself, like, am I crazy?
Yeah.
Am I making this up?
Yes.
Is this real?
Yeah.
And so I would say to leaders, especially around that piece, is like, trust your gut. Like our bodies don't tend to just make up that kind of a reaction and response to it. But when you realize like we're in a place, like for myself, I can think about times when I was truly having, I call them like you call anxiety attacks, but like panic attacks, specifically when it was around COVID, not knowing what the world of school was going to look like and sitting with my counselor and just like falling apart because I was it was the fear, it was the like, but am I going to fail? What's going to happen to these kids? It was just so overwhelming.
Yep.
And she was one of the, I had friends as well, kind of saying like, this isn't sustainable. The hamster wheel that you are on is not something that's sustainable. And I would even, as I think about that point in my life, I would say I had been doing a ton of the internal work. I had been doing a lot of the recognizing the red flags or the things that are coming up, how to take care of myself, how to make sure, I'm giving myself what I need. But because of the environment has shifted so much because of COVID, I didn't even think about like, I need to pause and revisit the internal work that I have done to make some shifts because the world is so different at that point. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important for leaders to, I'm a huge proponent of therapy and having solid friends and people to be able to have those spaces where we can talk about what's not working or what feels hard and what feels challenging, who can sometimes advocate for us or even sometimes say, no, Corey, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
You're not making this up. Like that you should be able to, you need more than a day off to kind of get yourself kind of reset. And so I think that's a really important thing for us to listen to our bodies, listen to our gut. And just because we have a boss or a board that tells us, oh, you got this, you can do it. That's not always going to be the answer. That's not what we need to hear. Like we actually need to, pause and say, no, I need more. And to be able to put those boundaries up and say, no, I can't make it to these meetings. I can't go to this training or whatever those pieces might be. So it even makes me think about with COVID and as someone who I would say never like a diagnosis of anxiety, but a lot of like an underlying current of anxiety, just part of my makeup. COVID exacerbated that. COVID made it like just, it was sometimes unmanageable. And I remember being asked to go to at the time, I don't know if you recall, the CDC or was having these meetings with school leaders to say, come learn about COVID and how to do the contact tracing. And for myself, I knew going into those meetings and hearing all of that information was going to make it worse for me.
Yeah.
And so like knowing myself enough to say like, oh, actually know that I get I get overwhelmed when it's too much information and having to be able to communicate with my boss and say, I know you've asked me to go to these meetings. I can't.
Yeah.
Because I know like what I need and adding more information and that's going to put me over the edge. And so I think that just another piece to be able to say, like, we got to advocate for ourselves. We have to know what we need to be okay.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, it's just an awesome story. I'm thinking about how important it is. If you want to talk about leadership, next level, well, like you're going to your leader who's asked you to go to those meetings and making this request, essentially saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, like, I know myself.
Yeah.
I know this is what I need right now. Think about how important that leader's response is in that moment.
Yeah.
Because if it is dismissive or if it is even has the slightest intonation of disapproval, what a powerful signal that sends.
Yes.
Because now you're telling Paya to make a choice. You can either have a role here and I can trust you to do your role, or you can walk out of this office knowing that I don't trust you. I
Yeah.
don't trust you to know yourself. I don't
Yes.
trust you enough to make a judgment
Yes.
about what you need right now.
Yes.
Wow.
And as I even think about, and I'm curious for you as well, as I was growing, and I would say in my emotional health of like knowing what I need and being able to name it, stand firm on it, advocate for myself, understanding my triggers or what all those pieces. As I was growing in my emotional health, I found that I was a much more compassionate leader to those that look to me. So as I'm growing and realizing, okay, here are the things that I need. Therefore, when I'm, talking with someone and I can see they're on, on the cusp of burnout, if you want to call it that, because I've been in those shoes and because I can feel it and I'm aware of it now, right? Because I'm settled, I'm regulated, I can be more aware of kind of how my staff is feeling, to be able to ask and sit with that person and say, okay, what do you need? Not go take a day off, right? That's not the answer to everyone,
right? But
truly taking a moment to create space, to ask him to show up, the person, not the position, and kind of saying, hey, here's what I'm noticing. Like, what do you need? What do you need right now? It just allowed me to be more compassionate to those folks as I was growing in my compassion toward myself. It was kind of, it was one of the things, you don't realize that that's an outcome of it, but it was this beautiful way of being able to show folks that this is what I want it to look like when you're working here with me as a boss. Like, I'm someone that cares about you, that sees you as a person, and also wants you to make sure you're taking care of yourself and giving yourself what you need.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thinking about two things from very early in our conversation. One is, I think you said something about so many of these things we don't learn in school, in our educational, graduate school and above. And I just want to echo, I'm sure more of that is happening. I trust more of that's happening in the graduate school programs that educational leaders are going through.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to, I think there were two things I wanted to say there, but that one really stands out a lot is just having the ability to recognize what one needs for oneself.
Yeah.
And when you are a leader who's led yourself, again, led your own self into a healthier place, being able to recognize it in others and support them. What a difference. I think the second thing I wanted to say is, in a world that we live in, like I'm talking about, here we are, 2025, there's so much change happening in our country right now that's impacting people. When you were talking about COVID and how that impacted your leadership and you as a person, I got to believe there are people who, even in schools where things like tariffs, they ought not to apply. But I got to imagine just the stress that our world is living through right now, that some of the things that you and I are talking about, it's just, I would say, as important as ever to be aware of oneself before you step into trying to lead anyone else anywhere right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. I'm going to pause this for a second because your video is showing up. Water bottle was in there. Yeah, as I hear you thinking about like how important it is for us to know ourselves before we step into that role, I also think there's a piece that happened, I would say, within the first 2 years of my leadership, specifically the former role as principal, as I was getting comfortable with who I am, the emotional piece is getting healthier in that part. I also grew in almost it's like this comfortability and being the leader that I was called to be, rather than the leader that I think someone else expected me to be. And I think that is a part of this internal leadership work that we don't talk enough about, is, for one, getting clear on like, why are we stepping into these roles? And also being comfortable enough to say, like, when I'm in this role, I wanted to really be, how am I trying to say this? Like, how do I show up authentically in the leadership role as myself instead of this imposter or who someone else has made me out to be? And I think that's a part around leadership that we don't talk enough about, is like, how do we create this, how do we walk in our own shoes as a leader versus the shoes that someone else has carved out for us?
Amen.
And so I remember, like, one of the books actually that really, I would say in many ways, like, released me from some of that was Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. And I had been a fan of her her work for years. I've read many of her other books, but reading that book coupled with the emotional growth and the emotional health that I was just experiencing really allowed me to just kind of say, like, I'm going to be the person, I'm going to be Paya. And I'm not going to try and be Janny or Sam or who these other leaders were. I'm going to simply be Paya. And Paya is an extremely emotional person, right? And so because of many years of work in therapy prior to being this work, I realized, like, because of a lot of my story, I suppressed a lot of my emotions, or it came off as anger. I was seen as like an angry person early on in my life. But as I got healthier and realized, like, no, there's all these emotions underpinning here. And I'm someone that will cry when I'm happy. I will cry when I'm sad. And I express excitement and tell people how much I appreciate them and care about them. This is just part of who I am as a person. And I remember stepping into these leadership roles, often thinking, like, okay, do I have to suppress that?
Right.
Do I have to be like, no emotions, or only like doom, 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 doom?
Yeah.
Right. And as I read that book, and she does a lot of, values work, and there's a lot of great things in it. That was one of these pieces of, like, hey, look, just be you. Like, let's just stop trying to fit this mold. And it was really tricky because my leadership journey, I would say, was tricky, challenging, I don't know what we're gonna call it. The role of principal had never existed in this school before. I don't know if I ever shared this.
Yeah.
And the head of school, who had this vision for this principal, like, he's the one kind of created the role, like, interviewed me like throughout the entire process. And once I was offered the job, and literally the next day I was called and they told me that that head of school resigned. And so I'm now stepping into this role without the, like, visionary who had created what this needs to look like. And so I remember, like, stumbling around for a while, like, okay, what did he say to them? What did he tell them that this person was going to be like? And I was so thankful for the interim head that came on board and was kind of like, just figure it out, do it. You got my support. Like, figure out what you want this role to look like. And so I'm saying all this to say, I think it's really important for leaders to take the time to think about who they want to be as a leader, the impact that they want to make as a leader, and really kind of I'm struggling with my words right now, but, like, really taking the time to think about what it looks to live that out on a daily basis versus this fitting the mold.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a personal example that I want to see if you can relate to it in terms of that emotionality I too am a very emotional person, and I led an all boys school, accomplished, athletic, I won't say athletic based school. I almost said it, but very proud of its athletic heritage. And so there's a bit of a macho culture associated with the place. And like yourself, my tears come very naturally, and they're not reserved for sadness, and so I had a couple of moments in my leadership where I had tears of joy and tears of sadness. And I think I was really comfortable with it until we had a consulting group come in and do some work around our whole leadership structure. And I remember the data coming back in, and it was all very favorable. And in the comments section, there's this one little thing, and it was directed at me, and it said, "I heard you cried." And I remember thinking to myself, "Oh my God, like, am I not supposed to do that? Am I supposed to?" Because there would be situations where, like, for instance, if I saw a student, and this happened, I saw a student who, when I'd see him come in the doors each morning, again, every morning, hello, how's it going, Jimmy? And that was my very limited reactions with interactions with students. And one time I took my family to a play, and there's Jimmy up on the stage, and I was just blown away that was the kid who I saw walking in the door. I couldn't believe that he transformed from this kid who said, "Hey, Mr. Quinn," and just blew by me, to he was up on the stage doing this just incredible performance, and it was enough to make me weep. Like I was, and so to to get a message, even if it's just one message that said, hey, we don't do that here. And having to ask myself, oh my gosh, like, do I not do that here?
Yeah.
Should I not do that here? So I think that authenticity, that's another word that gets thrown around so much, and vulnerability and all these sorts of things. And I just want to encourage anybody who's watching and listening to trust that, just trust it, because I think part of your story that is fascinating to me is that someone chose you. If I heard the story correctly, someone chose you for that leadership role, and then they were gone like the next day, almost literally. And so I imagine that what that might have felt like was, well, this person knew me. They saw the best in me, and they chose me, and they trusted all these different dimensions that make paya. And now that person's gone. Well, can I still be that person, or do I have to be what all these other people are expecting a leader to look like? Because that person tapped me. They knew something. They saw something. They trusted, and I can trust. But now they're gone.
And saw something over, like, and you're completely spot on. And also, like, saw something over time, right? So that interview process, that was longer than every process of my life. Like, it was months. I mean, there's some things we can do to shore that up.
That's another one.
But but that was, it was like, he saw me over many facets of time, and we had different conversations. And, this idea of, like, was that transfer? Was that related? Does that, like, now I'm in, do people really know what they signed up for? Do I actually really fit what they wanted? And so, there was a lot of that going on. And I think, in addition to, like, the reading that book and kind of feeling some freedom within that, I think another thing that has really helped me, and even helps me now, and that's why I think I appreciate you so much, is because you are so, I would say, your tears actually, when we first met, came out. And our first, at that networking event that we were in, as you were talking about something with your family, and it was something that, and seeing that, and just seeing your comfortability in that time. You're about to cry now. It's okay. I'll cry with you. It's okay. But no, like, but being around people who were so confident, being around you specifically, so comfortable and confident in the skin that the Lord has called you to be in, allow me to feel that same freedom. Right. And so I really think it's important for leaders, especially leaders who are like, I'm trying to figure out, do I fit? Like, you have to be around others who are comfortable in their shoes. And I feel like, back then, at the time, as a principal, as I was trying to figure out this role of consulting and coaching, and even now, like, this is a gift for me to be able to sit with and have coffee with and go on walks with people who are walking in the shoes that I, as a believer, like, the Lord has called you to walk in, and being comfortable in that allows me and sends this message of, like, hey, I do the same. Like, don't switch out your shoes. Don't switch out your laces. Don't do any of that. Just stay clear and firm on the path that God has called you to be on. And so I think it's really important for leaders to be in community with other folks, because we don't do that enough.
No.
I think there's such isolation. There's such competitiveness of, I got to be the leader that knows all the things. And I think we have to, I think that's one way we can really be more comfortable in our authenticity, is when we are with other folks who are comfortable in it. And so I just appreciate you in so many ways. So truly, like, that just really helps me to also, sorry, I don't have any tissues in my fancy studio here. But truly, it helps me to be more authentic and better as a leader by simply being in your presence. So just want to thank you for that.
Gosh, thank you. Holy cow.
Yeah, no. And so as we start to kind of turn the corner on this, and we've talked about this internal work that leaders need to do. Like, leaders need to be able to, get clarity on who they are as a leader, and who they want to be, instead of spending their time to do that. And also growing in this idea around this emotional awareness and knowing who we are, not just as a leader, but like who we are, like the emotional side of ourselves, and getting curious and getting healthy on that side of our leadership. And then I can't remember the first thing we talked about. I'm actually gonna look at my notes for a second. Sure. And then that first thing that we shared about knowing our strengths and being able to say, here's what I'm good at, and also here's kind of where I'm not here, where, I need to really tap on the shoulders of someone else. And so as you think about leaders who are doing this work, who are saying, all right, I've been doing the task, I've been doing the visible sides of leadership, and I want to start doing some of the internal shifts and work that I need to do as a leader. What is like a piece of advice or encouragement, or even suggestions that you would have for a leader who's really trying to start to do their own work right now?
Holy cow.
Oh it can be as much as you want it to be.
Wow. I think I want to tell a story again, just to impart a lesson. And I don't want it to be, it's kind of a cautionary tale, but it's also, I think there's a moral at the end of it. And I'll try to get the shortest version of the story as possible. I hired a coach in the midst of that, going back to the story where I had those couple of physical manifestations of like, you need help. And so, I thought, okay, it's time to get some help. So I started with a coach, and that was a really good thing to do. And it's too long a story to tell how that ended. But it didn't end great. And I think I could have looked back at that moment, and I could have said, well, coaching doesn't work, or I'm not supposed to be a leader. And I would just want to encourage people to, once you start down this path of really looking inward, it's going to be scary. We started with fear. We talked about fear and connection, I think, earlier. And I want to really encourage people that if they take this step, and the step could look like starting with a coach. It could look like getting a therapist. It could be just having coffee with Paya and saying, hey, I saw that video that you did. Can you tell me more about how you decided to work on yourself? Or do you do that kind of work? Can you walk with me? I want to encourage people to start, because like with anything in life, it's such a cliche, but that first step is often the most difficult. And then trust yourself, because I hired this coach, and as I already alluded to, it didn't work out well. And I could have thrown in the towel and said, I'm broken, or people are out to fleece me for whatever money I have left from having left my leadership job. And instead, I just kept almost doubling down at each step of the way on the answer is within. And I keep finding that to be true. And I'm finding it true sitting here again with you today. Like, I was scared coming to do this with you. And now that seems so silly. But I had to show up. And so
Thank you for showing up.
Oh, thank you. I mean, what a gift. Just what a gift. And so I'm not even sure what your original question was, but I hope it comes back around
there.
To,
like encouragement.
Show up.
And I love that. And I would even add like the starting, and also like taking that initial step, whatever that might be. And my encouragement is like to any leaders is like, you're not the only one going through it. We don't talk about it enough. We don't, it's not something people post about, like, oh my goodness, doing the internal work. It's dark today. That's not going to get a lot of likes. So maybe it will.
Because then all of your colleagues are going to be saying, stay away from Paya's office today.
Go by their office. But my encouragement is that you're not the only one that is maybe feeling what you're feeling, or struggling with like, who am I as a leader, or what are my strengths? And so just maybe busting down some of those misconceptions and really just building community. So maybe it's not, you're not ready to get a coach now, but is there another leader in your organization that you can have coffee with to just say, hey, I would just love to get to know you more, and just like to connect, to really build community? Because I think we are not meant to do this work alone. We are not meant to be in this world alone. We're meant to be, we are social beings. We want connection. And so I would just encourage leaders, like, how can you create connection right where you are? And starting there, and maybe it might help to break down some of the fear that you're the only person. And then from there, maybe it's a coaching conversation or a therapy or whatever that might look like, but really just to start, like take that step. And so I would encourage anyone listening today, as you think about our conversation that we've had, it's oh my goodness, it's been an hour almost. But as you listen to our conversation, just asking yourself, like, what's a one piece of internal work that you realize you want to lean into as a leader? And so just give yourself a moment to pause and maybe reflect on that. And I would just say, as we think about this hidden side of leadership, doing our own work is not a luxury. It is something that's necessary for our sustainable and impactful leadership. And so I don't want you to see this as I'll get to it in a couple of weeks or in a couple of years, but this is an essential piece of our work as leaders. And so just want to encourage you to prioritize yourself and prioritize this work. And so, Corey, I would love to give you a chance to share with folks, like, how can they connect with you? If people are listening and hearing your story and like, hey, I want to hear more from this guy. How can people find you? Where are you on social media and where?
Purposely keeping a low profile. I did a fast over Lent for LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my lone social media platform. So I'm on LinkedIn, and I found that 40 days of Lent and staying away from LinkedIn was actually so healthy and so good for me that I've been very careful about my reentry, but that's the answer is look for me on LinkedIn. I'm going to start posting on Tuesdays again because of this conversation. I think I'm part of what I'm walking away from here with is a call. It feels genuine right now to be more available to people, because I think there is an opportunity for people to benefit from my story. And what's the sake in keeping it to myself if I can help other people with it? So LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So hopefully you all will connect with Corey. And as if you're here and listening to this, you know where to find me. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, and also peakleaderscollective.com. And so I thank you all so much, Corey. Again, we could talk for hours, but we won't. Not today. We'll get another one scheduled. But I just thank you so much, as always, for just showing up as who you are and just sharing parts of your story. So I think it's going to be a blessing to many folks. And so I thank all of you who are either, listening in live or listening to the replay. We're hopeful that you find this encouraging in many ways. You feel less alone in the work that you are doing, and that you really begin to think about some of the steps that you can take to really tackle the hidden side of leadership. So thanks so much. Take care.